We've been exploring how technology is helping create a more accessible world with people who are making a difference in the accessibility space. And today's guest is someone whose story truly bridges the worlds of music, innovation, and accessibility. Richard Einhorn is a renowned composer and producer. His work has been performed everywhere from Disney Hall to the Sydney Opera House. And after experiencing sudden hearing loss, he became a passionate advocate for better hearing tech. He's been lending his voice, insight, and expertise to help shape and reshape how we think about accessibility in audio ever since. Hello, Richard. I'm so excited to get a chance to sit down and talk with you again. Thank you for doing this.
It's a joy. Great to see you, Dave. Always happy to chat with you.
Before we get to the real stuff, if you will, we like to kick things off with something a little unexpected, just a lighthearted question to break the ice and get us rolling. Are you up for it?
Go for it.
Awesome. Thank you for playing along. Richard, would you rather a tiny trumpet sound play from your pocket every time you connect to Bluetooth, or have to say "ta-da" really loud?
Probably the trumpet sound, but the truth is you will ultimately connect literally dozens, if not hundreds of times during a day. So please give me some variation in that trumpet.
We'll be sure. I don't know if I have any say in all that, but we'll pass that. We'll pass that along.
I'll write you variations.
I was going to say, if we only knew a composer who could help us out. Yeah.
There you go. There you go.
I will start with a question that I've asked all of our guests, and it's, what does accessibility mean to you personally?
That everybody can be accommodated in one way or another in order to be able to do whatever task they want to do, whether or not that task is a work-related task, a leisure-related task, a family-related task, or any other thing. It basically means having access, if you will, being able to enjoy or participate along with everybody else. And accessibility is not just for people who have so-called disabilities. Accessibility is for everybody, regardless of where they fall on the spectrum of being able to do a task or not do a task. The standard example of universal accessibility are these cuts in sidewalks. Here's the problem. Supposing you don't have any kind of mobility issue, but you have a shopping cart that you go to the store and you fill up your shopping cart and you go down the sidewalk and you're going back, and let's say that you've bought like 3 or 4 dozen eggs and now you have to cross the street. Well, the problem is that crossing the street with all those eggs is going to break some of them. There's just no question about it, unless you have one of these cuts in the sidewalk. So these cuts in the sidewalk, which were done basically in order to accommodate wheelchairs, end up having tremendous usability and utility for somebody, regardless of whether or not they actually have a so-called disability. And that's the important thing about accessibility. It means all of us can benefit from an approach, a design approach that takes our needs, our actual needs, into account.
You always have such a unique perspective on all this, and I love hearing how it's true that when accessibility is done right, it's almost invisible to us, right? We take it for granted. So many people wouldn't even notice the breaks in the sidewalks and things like that. But you're right, they're there for a reason. When accessibility is done right, it's universal, it's accessibility for all, and it's invisible, very natural. Richard, would you be willing to share with us kind of your own personal journey with accessibility?
I began to lose my hearing in 1990. I developed what was called a conductive hearing loss, which is basically just a volume loss, which is fairly simple. And basically the world started to get quieter and I just kind of lived with it. I didn't really do very much about it. Some people noticed that, maybe I wasn't hearing as well as I should, but I was able to cope and accommodate that. But then suddenly, for reasons that are very unclear, probably I had a virus, I lost all the hearing in my right ear overnight. And my left ear, which was the worst of the two ears, was suddenly the only hearing I had. And I literally went functionally deaf like that, just immediately. It was really, really a horrible day.
Hearing how you were thrust into the world of hearing loss so abruptly, can you help us understand, what are some of the biggest challenges from your perspective that people face when accessibility is missing?
I think the biggest challenge is the simple challenge of communication and connection in every single way. I mean, there's a famous statement quote from Helen Keller, who was deafblind, and she said, "Blindness separates us from things, but deafness separates us from people." And I completely and 100% agree. It is very, very hard to communicate to people with a very severe hearing loss. And it becomes especially difficult to communicate if there's any kind of noise available in the any kind of noise in the environment. So when you start to think about that, and you start to think about a typical restaurant or a typical even a yoga studio or a boardroom or something like that, a lot of these places are very, very difficult to hear and to communicate and to connect. And the sense of isolation that one gets, the sense of frustration is both psychologically difficult to manage and also physically tiring. There are studies that have said that literally the effort it takes to hear is so great that one becomes quite exhausted physically just simply struggling to hear. That's really what the issue is: the struggle to connect, the struggle to communicate, the struggle to make oneself, to actually understand somebody and to keep yourself in the conversation. Very difficult, very, very difficult.
Thank you for sharing, your story and helping us understand, the impact that this can have in people's lives. But there are technologies that have come along to help. Where do you see some of the biggest differences being made by technology right now?
What people with hearing challenges need is simple, easy, seamless connection to all these different kinds of devices, to all these different kinds of ways. We need to be able to easily connect to our computer's audio. We need to easily connect to the audio in a movie theater. We need to easily connect to our phones, to our watches, if we have watches. And what we have now is far better communication and far better wireless interplay between all these devices than when I first developed a hearing loss and became aware of these issues. That was in 2010. And back then, there wasn't any Bluetooth connection between, there was no way of wirelessly connecting to a phone, really. I mean, there were some hacks, but they weren't very good. And now we take it for granted that we can hear a phone call, we can hear a Zoom meeting if we take it on our phone in our hearing aids. This is wonderful. Or in our cochlear implants. This is really wonderful. And the only thing I can think of is more. We need more of this. In a business meeting, we need to connect to the TVs. We need to connect to the movies, and we need to be able to do this as simply and as easily as possible.
Hearing you speak, I'm reminded of a realization that you helped me come to the last time we talked, which was around how loud our world is and how difficult it is sometimes to tune in to the audio, to the information, to the sound that you want to hear, as opposed to all of the other background noise. So Auracast has been designed for many purposes and reasons, but one is to help public spaces create a better listening and hearing experience for visitors. Can you talk a little bit about Auracast and the change it's bringing?
At the moment, there's essentially three different technologies that are being used for public hearing assistance. And they're only being used for public hearing assistance. So the first advantage of Auracast is anybody can connect to an Auracast broadcast. That's the first advantage of it. You're breaking down the barrier between an assistance, a disability technology, and a simply standard technology that everybody can use. That is probably the most profound change that Auracast will bring, because suddenly we're no longer a separate class. We're just one more listener listening to a Broadway play over our earbuds, because that's cool and that's fun. And we can have some extra things going on in our earbuds that you wouldn't necessarily get if the sound was simply in the theater. So that's number one. Another thing that it can do is it can create, and I thought about this quite a bit. Auracast is an Auracast transmitter is basically a plug and play device. And what that means is that people can even bring this kind of technology very, very easily to simple things. Supposing you have some friends and you have, I don't know, maybe you have I don't know, a stamp club in your local library. You have some expert who's coming in who's going to talk about rare stamps or something. It doesn't matter. It could be something else, but let's say it's stamps. And well, you've got a bunch of people who are older and who can't hear very well, and you really want them to hear the talk. Well, a very, very simple Auracast transmitter could be hooked up to the PA system with literally a single wire. And then all the people have to do is like adjust something on their phone, hopefully maybe even flip the switch on their hearing aids, and boom, they're connected. There is no other technology that I'm aware of that is that easy to do, that is that easy to set up and also do that. So it means that accessibility can be something that is just simply ubiquitous. It's everywhere. It can be everywhere, and it can be set up in an instant. Auracast is a stereo technology. Auracast is actually a multi-channel technology, which means that very easily people can design installations where, supposing you want to practice your Spanish for some reason at a movie theater, you could switch very easily to a Spanish channel. But supposing you also want to know it in Arabic or in Hebrew or in Chinese, there's nothing that prevents a venue from and media creators from making multiple translations available on as part of an Auracast package. That's fantastic. And finally, you get to the thing which me, as an audiophile, I mean, even though my hearing is terrible these days, I was trained in audio engineering and I remain an audiophile, and I'm still desperate to get the best sound I possibly can. Auracast dramatically improves the sound quality of a broadcast signal, of a wireless transmission. I've played some of the examples that are on your website for friends of mine who are professionals in the industry and who have so-called, quote, golden ears, and they're just flabbergasted. They just can't believe that these are that these are wireless transmissions, because they're that good. And that is something that I think everybody, even people with hearing loss, can benefit from.
We've spent a lot of time talking about audio accessibility, and oddly enough, Auracast can play a role for people with vision loss as well. Can you comment a little bit about how Auracast can be potentially used to enable visual descriptions for people who have challenges visually?
Yeah, I mean, I was speaking earlier about translations, but one of the things that people with low vision or with blindness really love are audio descriptions, and Auracast would enable, again, a separate channel that could provide an audio description only, not on top of the dialogue, but simply provide an audio description of what is going on with the scene while the dialogue also plays in their ears. And that would be fantastic. Now, of course, these technologies are already there, but they're done in a kind of a, how do I put it? It's difficult to set these technologies up and it's difficult to keep and to maintain them, and they often break. One of the advantages, at least that I've seen from my own experience with Auracast publicly, is that it's extremely easy to set up and configure, and it will only get easier to set up and configure as more tools get released, especially to the general public.
I would love for you to share the story of an Auracast demonstration of using your composition and what that experience was like.
Sure. I wrote a very large piece about Joan of Arc called Voices of Light, and it's become a huge hit. It's been done all over the world. It was a best-selling classical record. And recently we had an opportunity to bring it back for the third time to Lincoln Center, which was really, really exciting. And we performed it at Alice Tully Hall. So my friend Jill Mecklenburger, who works for GN Resound, asked me if it might be possible to do a demonstration at Alice Tully Hall of Auracast technology. And I said, sure, we can certainly ask Lincoln Center, and we can ask the presenters, the New York Choral Society, if they would be willing to actually do that. And they said they agreed. And Jill brought along to Lincoln Center, brought along the very simple Resound device, Auracast transmitter, that they typically use for just setting up TV transmissions. But it turns out that this little transmitter could actually cover all of Alice Tully Hall, which is a 1,500 seat theater at Lincoln Center. It could cover it all. We had a second one as a backup, but really we only needed one. The sound of this was so good, I couldn't believe it. I absolutely couldn't believe it. I thought that what I would do is I would sit there and I would listen to the, I'll listen a little bit to the Auracast and then I'd enjoy it live. But the mix that Kevin created and the sound quality that was going out over Auracast was so incredible that I just basically said, the heck with it, I'm just going to listen over my hearing aids. And I had just an absolutely wonderful time. We had around 10 or 15 people who were also part of the field tests, and they were using various different Auracast devices. And they all had very similar experiences to me. It was a wild success. The only thing I can hope is that Lincoln Center puts a system like that in all the time, so I can simply go there and hear as easily as I heard back then. It was just incredible. I'm always honored that anybody would be willing to perform my music, and it's always a great joy, but it's often a challenge when listening if there isn't a good public assistive listening system, because I simply can't hear it the way I heard it when I was 40, when I wrote the piece. And but now I could really hear it in a really, really wonderful way without too much ambience or noise in the background. It was just fabulous. And yeah, it was, I was kind of sad when it all ended because, it really was a remarkable experience.
Well, and hopefully it doesn't need to end. Hopefully, I mean, we've been very encouraged to see the number of venues starting to install these Auracast transmitters that can have the effect that you're describing. So again, hopefully it doesn't have to end. It's only just beginning. I was going to ask you, imagine you have every tech designer or every venue operator out there lined up in front of you, right? You have their full attention for, 60 seconds, whatever. What would you tell them?
Be creative. Don't look at this technology as simply broadcasting to people with hearing loss. Be creative and do something with it, because there is so much that can be done. There are so many cool things that can be done once you have better than CD quality audio being broadcast all over a theater. It is just unbelievable what you can do in terms of placing sounds in somebody's environment, having things run around them, having all sorts of different ways of processing voices so that they create different things. Imagine the witches from Macbeth going all over your head because you've got some sort of ambisonic thing going on with Auracast. There is so much that can be done, and I just can't wait to get in touch with a director and have this technology available and start to be able to play with it. And you know who's going to benefit the most from it, from all this creativity? People who really need the technology simply to connect. The best thing we can do is to be creative with it, and those of us who really will benefit from it will really benefit from it.
Well, listen, Richard, thank you for sharing this time with us and lending your voice to this important discussion. Thank you for everything you're doing to champion universal access and inclusion. We really appreciate you spending the time with us, and we appreciate you.
Thanks, Dave. It's always a pleasure to chat with you, and always a pleasure to talk about Auracast and Bluetooth.